Welcome to our Leaders in Housing Counseling call, first one in February. Thanks everybody for joining. It looks like we have a good turnout already, and I know more will join us. So the call today is going to focus a lot on marketing and marketing issues, and trying to figure out how to better serve underserved communities, how to reach them, and how to elevate the image of housing counseling. But before that, we're going to do our deep dive into legislative issues, the good work Melody is doing, and things we've done in Congress, and certainly HUD housing counseling funding, critical issues for all of us. We're also a budding conversation right now about the impact of the language issues on the counseling certification, prep, and exam, and we'd love to get your feedback on that. And then we'll spend most of the call with our friends at CMR. Many of you probably have heard them speak at different times in HUD gatherings and on webinars. They have a big initiative they're working on to make it more accessible to have high quality marketing materials for counseling groups. But they've also done a lot of research through their contract with HUD that will impact our business and learn how we can do our work more effectively. So we hope that should be quite useful. We will do another punch for a picture's still worth 1,000 words, because this has been really valuable, and we're actually going to use some of those pictures in a presentation we're doing in New York City next week or 2 weeks from now, so very helpful. On NHRC membership, and actually I want to also mention on the call next in 2 weeks, we're going to do another round on student loans and how to manage student loan issues, and particularly trying to figure out how this could be helpful to your staff who might have student loans, and the Public Service Forgiveness Program. We're working with a software company that's got a very good product out there that's free to use, and there's some fees involved if you want to use it for filing, but it's from people who came from the CFPB. I'll say a little bit more at the end of the call about it, but the point here is that this could be valuable for our staff, and this could be valuable for our clients, and especially if student loans are a big issue in your portfolio of people you're working with, and you're not a specialist in all the ins and outs of the program. This is a very easy to use methodology for getting people into the right program to match what their needs are. So we're pretty interested in it. We'll devote the call in 2 weeks to this rollout of this presentation. We think it'll be quite valuable for everybody. So with that note, let's move on to Melody and what's happening in our work in Congress. Melody.
Thank you. So things have been kind of stalled for a couple of weeks due to the impeachment process. I'm sure as many of you heard, that process is officially over. We don't have to dwell on it, but it means that Congress is back to reprioritizing all other functions of government, including appropriations. So that's where we're going to kick off. The President's fiscal year 2021 budget request is tentatively scheduled to be released next week. I think we heard that it was going to be the 10th. So we're going to be far more aggressive on our timelines for submitting our request for $65 million for the Housing Counseling Assistance Program. After our experience for fiscal year 2020 last year sort of wrapped up, we realized that we really need to take advantage of time prior to the release of the budget request in order to really be on the front of the minds of Congress when they submit their appropriations request to different committees. So you might have received an email from me yesterday asking people to, reach out to lawmakers via phone, call them, talk about the importance of housing counseling funding. But also there was a sign-up link to join our fiscal year 2021 sign-up letter. This will be going to both the chairs and ranking members of both the full Appropriations Committee in both chambers, as well as the Transportation HUD Appropriations Subcommittees in both chambers. You might have heard these names before. They're very familiar at this point, such as Chairwoman Susan Collins or Chairman David Price over in the House. We're really excited about this. There's no open deadline on the sign-on letter yet, just because the THUD subcommittees have not released their own deadline for requests. So until they do, the sign-on letter is open. We've had 50 organizations sign on. Thanks so much for that. We're hoping that we can beat our number from last year at this time, which I think was about 300. So getting 50 in one day is actually really impressive. So thank you, everyone who joined. Following the call, we'll be resubmitting to the sign-on link. So if you haven't already joined, you still have an opportunity to join. Also, you should keep a lookout for emails from me, because despite having just our sign-on letter and calling, a lot of offices have official processes in their own office for how to take in requests. So some offices have Google Forms, some have Word documents or PDFs, some just want to take emails. And so I'll be coupling to the fullest extent I can all the different methods per state. So different state delegations, I'll send you guys an email, and you'll be able to submit every single appropriations request for your state at once. And if you need any assistance with talking points or data points or more of the more technical, legislative, wonky terms, just reach out to me, and I'm happy to assist you with that going forward. And each office also has different deadlines, so some of you might get emails before others. Moving right along, Bruce and I had really good conversations last December with Matt Jones in Chairman Crapo's office. Chairman Crapo is the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, which most housing counseling legislation goes through in the Senate. A few of the bills that we were working on last year we thought wasn't going to move, but a lot of developments have happened in the last week, which is really exciting. So the Housing Financial Literacy Act from 2019 passed the House, and we've been working very closely with Senator Peters on introducing a Senate version. And for a while, we felt that bill kind of stalled because Senator Peters wanted to introduce with a Republican co-sponsor. Right now, nothing in the Senate is going to move if it doesn't have very broad and deep Democrat and Republican support. However, we just connected with the office, and we anticipate the legislation is going to be introduced very soon, hopefully this spring, with a Republican original co-sponsor. This bill had bipartisan support in the House, and Bruce and I worked closely with both chambers' original sponsors on language for the bill. So we're very excited about that, and we'll be going back to the Senate and talking about this bill with different offices again after sort of putting a hold on it when we were looking for an original sponsor. In terms of the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery legislation, which I will just call disaster recovery going forward because it's a very long word, Senator Tillis from North Carolina will join as one of the primary original co-sponsors of this bill, which is sponsored by Senator Schatz from Hawaii and Todd Young from Indiana. So originally this bill was introduced last year, and there was some disagreement amongst Republican members of the Senate. They thought that the language was too granular. They had some disagreements about some of the provisions, including some of the fair housing provisions. And so Senator Tillis and Burr of North Carolina introduced their own disaster recovery bill, which left out a lot of the provisions the field has been advocating for the last 2 years. So thankfully, from the work of Senators Schatz and Young, as well as the National Low Income Housing Coalition, which is leading this charge in the Congress, they believe that Senator Tillis is willing to join the stakeholder preferred disaster recovery legislation. We have not gotten final language on what those changes are, but we're hearing that that those changes will not include right now housing counseling specific legislation, so that councils will be included in the disaster recovery plan. So we'll still be working with these offices to see if we can get an amendment for this language. We understand that now that there's more original co-sponsors, that a hearing in Senate banking is more likely. And following a hearing, we might have a markup shortly after. It really depends on the timeline of the chair. So we're hoping that we can find some offices They'll be open to including that amendment. Anyone from North Carolina, because we had great conversations, I believe, last August with Senator Tillis, please reach out to me. I think there might be openings and opportunities to request that Senator Tillis include that housing counseling language amendment, given how strong housing counseling is in the state of North Carolina. And that's it for me.
And just, and really great work here. Thank you, Melody. One thing I'll just add on the sign-on letter, this is critical work for us. This is partly how House and Senate members realize that housing counseling is a major constituent activity. We organize these both by national organization, but mostly by state, so that people can go and look and see how many groups signed up in Arkansas. So if it happens to be that your counseling agency has multiple offices in different states, we would like you to register for each of those offices so that your Nebraska office and your Wyoming office get credit for them, because some states it's actually hard to get numbers in, and we really need to have all 50 states covered. So that's totally valuable. And then the other thing I think Melody really pointed in is that this is the time of the year where rank and file House and Senate members have the ability to tell appropriations what their priorities are. And when Melody's reaching out, it's really about getting more and more of your House and Senate members, and really especially the Senate, to say they'd like to have $65 million for HUD housing counseling as a priority. And as Melody said, different offices handle this differently, but some have a form, some just take a call, but all of that's really valuable, and we really need it right now. So thanks for all your support here. Here's a very quick opening update. People from Minnesota Home Ownership Center and from NCRC had brought up to our attention that counselors were having some challenges where English wasn't their first language, and we know these issues a lot, and we know that that's well represented in our work, and that that's a very valuable part of it, but that the preparation for the tests and the actual taking of the tests hasn't been as smooth, has been somewhat challenging for people. So we wanted to get our arms around what exactly that is, and so we're going to put out a Survey Monkey. So certainly if you if that is something that in your staff or you personally have had some experience with, all we're going to do is ask what languages and give us an idea of what the challenges are. We're reaching out to HUD shortly. We'll expect to have a meeting soon with Danbury Carmen about a range of HUD issues, but this one would be one we'd like to put on the list, but would like to get a better understanding of what it's like in the field. So keep an eye out for that. I should get that out today still. Good. Well, with that, let's move on to marketing and to opportunities here to really improve our ability to create public awareness about housing counseling and its value. Ellie, why don't you do the introductions?
Thanks, Bruce. Hi, everybody. So, we have been talking with all of you over the last year to year and a half, 2 years, about the importance of marketing and getting the word out about your organization. So CMR, as many of you know, like Bruce said, they've spent the last 4 years working with HUD and coming up with some pretty decent information and knowledge about what works with marketing and what direction to go. And so they're going to spend some time today talking to us about what they've learned and what they know, and then also discussing a potential opportunity for housing counseling agencies to work with them and partake of their expertise. So Lauren Banks and David Bowles from CMR are going to do a presentation to talk about the different aspects of what they've learned. So Lauren and David, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Ellie. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you for making the time to let us present and share a little bit about what we've learned with HUD and the value of marketing and communication. So just want to go over some things that we'll talk about today. We're going to give you a background of our work with HUD, as Ellie mentioned. We've had the pleasure to work with them since 2015. So we're going to talk a little bit about that awareness and visibility campaign. Then we're going to talk about the importance of marketing outreach, what we found not only from that campaign, as well as some additional research that we've done with HGAs around that. We'll share a little bit about the HGA Marketing Co-op, just so that you all have knowledge of what's kind of coming down the pipeline, and then we'll talk about next steps and how you can connect with us if you need more information. So as we move forward, I want to give a quick background about myself. As Ellie mentioned, my name is David Bowles. I'm our Chief Strategy Officer, and I'm joined with Lauren Banks, who's our VP of Client Services. And so just to give you a quick background about our company, we're a strategic communications agency that specializes in behavior change and social marketing. We were founded in 1995 really to meet the unmet market needs for agencies who could effectively reach multicultural and underserved audiences. And so since that time, we've evolved to reach what's called cross-cultural audiences, but that mission is really the core of what we do. So we understand that we need to use communications to create positive change that really actively addresses some of society's most pressing problems. And so we know from our knowledge with HUD, as well as just our continuing conversations with many of you on the phone, as well as other HGAs, that HGAs provide key services to underserved audiences, and they provide access to housing education that really helps these audiences build wealth. And so from a core mission standpoint, this kind of work really aligns with what we've been doing for 25 years. And so we're excited to do this, and we're hopeful that we can make a change as we move forward. Just a little bit about the folks who are on this account as well. It's not just Lauren and I. We're a full agency here. We have over 20 people who work with us, and then we have other agencies that serve as strategic partners. But some of the folks who are intimately involved with this campaign and have knowledge of it are on the screen here. So we have a whole array of staff in multiple areas. As you can see, we have folks who deal with communications and PR, paid media, social media, and then we have graphic designers. So our staff reflect America, and they reflect the kinds of audiences that many of you reach as well. So I'm going to throw the ball to Lauren, who's going to give a little bit of background about our work with HUD.
Thanks, David. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lauren Banks. So as David mentioned, we've worked with HUD's Office of Housing Counseling for a number of years, and our relationship with housing counseling has only continued to grow, and it's something that's really very near and dear to our hearts, especially just the aspect of being able to work with and serve folks who historically have been underserved and don't always know about or know how to acquire services that could really benefit them. So from 2015 to 2019, we worked with HUD's Office of Housing Counseling to help really bring awareness and visibility to housing counseling services. And so throughout our time today, I am going to share with you some of the research findings and the things that we have come to learn. We did about 18 to 24 months of research during that 4 years to just understand what consumers are saying about housing counseling, what housing counselors are saying about housing counseling, what industry professionals such as lenders and real estate professionals are saying about housing counseling. And so we have condensed that very much for you today to just kind of highlight some of those things. But to start with, I do want to just share some of the main objectives of that work in terms of the housing counseling awareness and visibility campaign. So the first thing that we really looked to do was to increase stakeholder awareness. And so we developed a brand for the Office of Housing Counseling. And some of you all may remember seeing the little house roof line that we created in the logo and the style guide, and just really giving it a new face and a new look and feel so that it was more appealing, more engaging, and resonated more with audiences. We also positively changed the perceptions of housing counseling services. So we created marketing materials, brochures, posters, flyers, videos that really spoke to the different consumer groups. So renters, first-time home buyers, those who may find themselves in default or foreclosure. We were the masterminds behind the Beat the Odds poster. So some of you all may remember seeing that Beat the Odds poster, Beat the Odds with Housing Counseling, that was disseminated in 2016 and then again in 2018. And then we work with many of you to really help disseminate messaging during National Homeownership Month. And so you may recall the National Homeownership Month Toolkit and some of the videos that we produced during that time. We also look to motivate behaviors that really lead to acquiring housing counseling. And so in order to do that, we develop social media content for HUD as well as for what we're calling HCA-owned channels, meaning the channels that you as housing counselors use. And then we also kind of took our show on the road, and we went out and trained housing counseling agencies and counselors on how to utilize social media. And so we partnered with NCRC and RCAC, who are already having national conferences in different areas. And so we flew out to those places and we conducted like full 2-day trainings on just how to utilize social media, how to utilize different tools within marketing outreach to really help them to connect with consumers. And then lastly, we partnered with stakeholders to really amplify the messaging. And so we work with some really wonderful partners, including Bruce and Ellie with the National Housing Resource Center. We worked with Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, Hope Now. I mentioned NCRC and RCAC, and I can't even name everybody, but it was just a really awesome opportunity to partner with some folks who obviously believe in the work and really amplify the messaging. And the overall goal really was not simply to increase awareness, but it was to change perceptions, but it was really to engage consumers through education. As David mentioned, it's really our bread and butter. We're not a typical, I would say, advertising agency, in that we are always looking to reach underserved markets, and we're always looking to educate an audience who may not always have that information at their fingertips or be aware of the services that are available to them. And so throughout our presentation today, as I mentioned, we are going to kind of refer back and forth to a lot of what we learned during that time in our work with HUD, because it really has been kind of the springboard into the work that we're going to be presenting to you all today, and the opportunity that we have to just really further that work. We all know that housing counseling provides, a really wide range of services to home buyers, to homeowners, to low-income renters, even the homeless. And so we're really looking at an opportunity to reach who would be oftentimes underserved populations, people who don't know about the services. And so those primary objectives are to improve financial literacy, to expand those homeownership opportunities, and then to improve access to affordable housing, and to oftentimes preserve home ownership. The unfortunate part about it, I think, though, is that despite all of the research that's telling us that, housing counseling and housing counseling education works to prevent foreclosures and to strengthen homebuyer readiness, there are a number of problems with marketing outreach. And what we're seeing is that there's a lack of awareness. Folks just do not know that housing counseling services exist, or if they are aware of housing counseling services, they often believe that these services are for only the most challenged consumers, and so they don't see it as something for them. And that really speaks to the misperception, I think, that's out there about housing counseling. And we'll talk a little bit about what we found in terms of why that might be, in terms of the name counselor, but I think ultimately just a lack and a problem of not really not really reaching out to markets and not really marketing the services. And then there's also just a lack of coordination in the industry. We had an opportunity to speak with mortgage originators. We had an opportunity to speak with licensed real estate professionals, and there just tended to be this kind of sentiment that if I send my client to housing counseling services, I may not get them back. They may not come back to me because housing counselors work with other lenders and they work with other real estate professionals, and so they'll refer my client out to someone else. And obviously, we all know on the phone that is not the reality, but that's just a misperception, and that leads to that in the industry where housing counseling should be the first step, and it's oftentimes not. It's oftentimes the third or fourth step in the process. And that really leads to the fact that housing counseling services are often undervalued. I mentioned lenders and licensed real estate professionals are hesitant to partner with HCAs. From a consumer standpoint, what we saw was that consumers are often engaging in counseling after they've done all these other things, and now it's just, I can get this certificate if I attend this class or this workshop, and that'll help me with my down payment. So it's just an afterthought, and rather than consumers valuing the education and all the knowledge that they're going to gain from housing counseling, it's more financial benefit. And so that the services are really undervalued. What we also found, and I alluded to this in an earlier slide, is that there's a misperception of what housing counseling actually does and what it provides. And part of that reason, we believe, is the term counselor itself may be problematic. So after hearing just that there's a problem with this term counselor over and over again in our research, we heard it from consumers, we heard it from lenders, from real estate professionals, we heard it from you as housing counselors. We really dug a little bit more deeply into just the definition. And so what you see on the screen is the definition of the word counselor. So a person trained to provide guidance on personal, social, or psychological problems, an alcohol abuse counselor. So obviously that does have some negative connotation. And so we started asking folks in our focus groups and in our survey work, well, what name would you give housing counseling? If you don't want to be called counselors, what would you want to see as the new name? And so we ranked those in order 1 through 4 of popularity. The first being housing advisor, housing advocate, housing educator, and then housing consultant. So that's what people actually said to us when we asked, what would you want to trade out this word counselor for? And for those of you who are just so curious and love research, you want to know what number 5 was. I know you do. So that was housing coach was number 5. All right, and so moving along with just some of the things that we heard from our consumers, housing counseling ultimately is a best kept secret. What we kept hearing over and over again are some of these quotes on the slide here. I wish I had known about this. I cannot tell you the number of people who said that to us. We conducted focus groups nationwide among who we consider to be first-time home buyers. So those would be folks who either bought their home in the last 6 months or are looking to buy a home in the next 6 months. And they kept saying, I really wish I would have known about this, especially people who had recently purchased. I did not know these programs existed for all homeowners. So again, that misperception that housing counseling is only for a certain group of people and not for everybody. Housing counseling is for low-income individuals. We heard that a lot. We also heard some advice from people, from consumers themselves, saying, hey, you really need to get out in front of consumers when they first start thinking about buying a home. So again, that sentiment that housing counseling right now is not the first step when it really should be. And then we kept hearing the question over and over again, HUD is Section 8, right? So not necessarily a bad thing, but definitely a misperception that housing counseling is not for everybody. But from their own words, we know that consumers need housing counseling services. So when we ask consumers, well, what are some of your thoughts and challenges around home buying? What we heard was, borrowing money makes me feel uncomfortable. Well, that's a problem, right? Because when you're buying your first home, you're borrowing usually a lot of money. And then oftentimes it's the most money you probably ever borrowed in your life. I feel overwhelmed by financial burdens. This was something we heard a lot, particularly from millennial audiences. And what we do know about millennials is that they have increasingly more education debt than other audience groups, right? And so if you're already feeling a little uncomfortable about borrowing money, you're probably going to be overwhelmed by your financial burdens, because the moment you're out of school, you're in the situation where you're owing back debt for your education. But the silver lining, I'm willing to ask for financial advice. So while consumers are feeling uncomfortable about borrowing money, they're feeling overwhelmed by financial burdens, they're looking for somebody to provide that knowledge. When we asked consumers, well, what would be the really appealing thing about housing counseling for you? They said the idea that somebody has my back, the idea that this one person in this group has no financial stake in this, they're not making money off of me, they're just here to help me, and they have my back. And so that's really what we would see as the silver lining here, and the impetus behind wanting to do more outreach.
Great, thanks, Lauren. So Lauren talked a lot about those research findings. I think that it's interesting because our team took those research findings and said, what are the implications of that? And one of the things that we found was that there's really a need among consumers for housing counseling, and that there's a demand for it, right? And that really the gap is that a lot of consumers are unaware. Lauren shared information about how folks said, you know, I didn't know that these programs existed, or wow, it's the best kept secret. And so part of what we wanted to do is figure out how do we really get in front of them in a way that lets them know the value of these services and really reach those needs moving forward. So again, that concept of the best kept secret shows that there's a perception of value among our consumers, right? They see the value of housing counseling, but that they just remain unaware. And I think that that's where housing counseling and outreach for housing counseling comes in. 90% of first-time homebuyers were not aware of housing counseling services. 80% said they wish they had known, and then 87% believe that housing counseling is only for the most disadvantaged consumers. So we know that there's still some work to do, but these are not hard sets to overcome, right? It's really a matter of how do we get in front of people to let them know that this is a resource, and then how do we explain the resource to say, here's how it can directly impact you. And building on that, we know that millennials are the single largest generation of folks purchasing their new homes. About 50% of new mortgages in 2020 will be among millennials. And the reason that this is important is that this audience is very trusting of things like social media and word of mouth communication. So we know that 72% of millennials say that, you know, if a brand engages with them, they're more likely to trust it. So that's, once again, another one of those avenues that housing counseling can use to get in front of a new generation that is buying a home or is really thinking about using housing counseling services. And so just to build on that, our research with HUD really led us to some conclusions that we think are important to share. We know that engaging with consumers and HCAs really indicated that there's 4 components for effective HCA to consumer outreach. Social media and digital, we know that, again, these audiences, millennials and others, are highly active in this space, and that unfortunately a lot of HCAs struggle to really keep up with some of the needs of this space because it's constantly changing. Collateral materials, we know that, you know, whether it's HCAs, intermediaries, other organizations, you're in front of people, and you need to have collateral materials that can grab people's attention and really draw them into housing counseling and let them know that this is a resource for them. A website or an app, we know that the first thing people do, right, when they start the home buying process is go to Google and they look up, how do I start to buy a home? So you want to be in front of them where they are to say, hey, you know, we want to create some awareness and some value around the services that we have in housing counseling so that it can be that first step, right? As Lauren talked about, right now it's an afterthought. So we want to use that tool to help that. And then public relations and event marketing. People, you may hear a lot about folks who don't trust the media. Well, there's a nuance to that. They don't trust national media sometimes, but they really trust local media. So, you know, you want to be in your community, folks know who you are. You want to use public relations and events to be able to get in front of them to say, here's the value that we bring, here are the services that we can offer to you as you're thinking about buying a home or in any other process of the home continuum. So one of the things that we wanted to do was really confirm our understanding of the HCA outreach needs. As Lauren shared, we did about almost 2 years of research with HUD, talked to a whole slew of stakeholders, but we really wanted to make sure that we understood the needs of HCAs. And so a few months ago, we actually conducted a survey, and with Ellie and Bruce's help, we really were able to get that out and get over 200 HCAs to respond. And the survey was really focused on understanding the kinds of outreach needs that HCAs had. And what we found was that social media, website and online, and then events were the 3 biggest areas of support that HCAs identified that they're currently doing. They're saying, okay, here's where we're at. You know, we're doing these things right now. It's working, but we may need some more assistance. And so that's the second question on the right, which is, you know, they identified a number of services where they could use support to really improve the effectiveness of their outreach efforts. And so you can see from the graph there that it's things like social media, materials, public relations, an app for counseling, right? So that we can really go into the digital space, videos. And so there's a whole slew of materials and support areas that HCA identified a need for. And so, you know, we really thank everyone who participated in this, including some of you on the phone. And what we were able to do is to pull insights that really helped us to tailor a solution to help meet some of these needs. And so again, there's three big areas that our team found from that HCA survey when we combined it in with the other information that we knew. One, that there's required support in critical areas, such as social media and collateral development that will really allow for increased capacity. What we heard was that a lot of HCAs have one person who wears multiple hats who has to do this on the side. And so they're losing capacity. And if they could have something that would take that off their plate, they could really increase that level of capacity. There's a desire for a consistent modern brand that really raises awareness and perceptions of housing counseling nationally. So what we heard was that folks said, you know what, if you're an agency in California and you're an agency in Pennsylvania, you may be doing two totally different things to get the word out there. And, if someone moves from California to Pennsylvania, they may lose that interaction with that brand. So there needs to be some cohesiveness around the industry in housing counseling. And then lastly, there was a desire for ongoing support. How do we really find a way that HCAs can get the ongoing marketing and outreach support in the many areas that they need it in on an ongoing basis versus a one-off here or there? And so the case for marketing outreach support. So what we know is that marketing outreach is crucial to connecting our consumers with housing counseling. Lauren talked about this data at length in the research that consumers said, you need to be in front of us. This is a wonderful thing, but we don't know about it. So we know that that's an absolute need. But the problem is that outreach is sometimes time-consuming, costly, and can produce limited ROI if the person doing the outreach is not an expert in that space. And so we know that part of, like anything else, you wouldn't hire a plumber to be a lawyer, right? They don't have that expertise. So it's the same thing here. You want to get people who understand how to help you with outreach to really make it most effective. And then part of that solution is to develop a consistent message that HCAs can use to really improve that effectiveness and efficiency of their outreach. So how do we really bring everything together to move it forward in a way that makes sense? And so that led us to something called Let's Make Home Happen, which some of you may have heard about, but really it was a concept and a campaign theme and that idea of a national brand around housing counseling and building that awareness for housing counseling. We really think it has four strong points to it. First, it's actionable, showcasing that housing counseling is a first step. The Let's Make Home Happen is sort of a command to folks to say, come on, let's do this. We can make it happen. We can get past the finish line. One of the things that we heard in our audience is they said, I want someone who has my back who can help me get past the finish line, right? They said, I want to be in the driver's seat, but I want to have that person sitting in passenger seat who can really help me drive the car past the finish line. Secondly, it speaks to a diverse population of historically underserved audiences. We know this is so important because historically underserved audiences oftentimes feel like nobody has their back because of historical reasons. And so by using Let's Make Home Happen, we're communicating something that's collaborative, that is a process that we're there with them from start to finish. And it encompasses a wide variety of housing needs. Home can be whatever people make it. It can be a physical home, it can be your apartment, it can be someone who may not be homeless anymore, it is now into a group home. And so there's a lot of meaning of the word home, but it elicits an emotional feel to it. And then lastly, we know that this campaign is customizable and can be co-branded. It is completely flexible to different positionings of all of our HCAs, and we think that there's a lot of broad buy-in among all of our HCA audiences. So putting all this together, so what does this look like? I talked a little bit about the research that we did, right? We identified some of the demands, some of the needs from HCAs. So our team took Let's Make Home Happen. We worked with Ellie and a whole advisory council to really come up with a marketing co-op structure that would be affordable for agencies to opt into. So it includes a number of services that I don't have time to dive into today, but basically we wanted to really provide a combination of services for different HCAs who are at different levels, right? So whether you're, an HCA that just needs the basic or you're looking for more integrated services, we wanted to provide a whole slew of services that could really meet all of those needs. So I'm going to quickly go through a couple of examples of what some of the materials in this co-op look like, and they're really based on, again, the feedback that we heard from you all and our research through HUD. So the first thing that you see is an example of a poster flyer that will be really a resource through our clearinghouse. So one of the things that we heard was that HCAs, oftentimes someone who will be working on this will spend 3 to 4 hours per week doing marketing materials. Well, that's not the best use of their time. And so this would be an opportunity for HCAs to use a flyer that can be distributed at community events, hung in their local coffee shops or other community areas, and really allow for the co-branding of their materials. One of the things that we noticed with our work with HUD was that HUD branded materials could not be co-branded. This is a regulation through HUD, and so there was really no way to get around that. And what we heard from HCAs was, wow, you know, that's wonderful, but we really wish we could have our logo on there and our sponsor's logo, because that helps us to get our name out there, right? Get our brand in front of our consumers. So with this opportunity, you will have that ability to co-brand those materials. Another example that we wanted to provide is through the co-op are digital ads. And so we know digital outreach is huge. As I mentioned, the first thing people do is they Google information about the home buying process. And so you want to reach them in that channel where they are, right, when they're making those decisions. And so in order to move housing counseling to the beginning of the process, we have to make sure that we find a way to engage with audiences around what we're doing. And these components do that. Another piece is just an event invitation. As I mentioned, events are big. They're a huge avenue for lead generation. And so this event invitation really allows agencies to have access to a customized professional template that can feature their partner logos, the who, what, when, where, why, general info about the event, and really be able to put that into their communities. And then the last is the letsmakehomehappen.org website. Part of that website will be an interactive map that agencies can utilize that consumers can utilize to find housing counseling agencies nearest to them. And our campaign will be focused on driving traffic to the website. So HCAs who opt into this will get exposure to audiences they otherwise wouldn't get. So really it's opening that channel to get in front of people based on what we heard from our research, which was, this is great, but I don't know about you. So we really wanted to think about how do we bring that full circle.
All right. So with that, we're going to talk about next steps. So I know that we have limited time today. So if you would like additional information about the marketing co-op, you want to hear a little bit more about some of the work that we've done with HUD and our outreach with housing counseling, you can schedule a consultation with CMR. So the email address for that is hcacoop@cmredge.com. David had some time to walk you through a little bit about the website. That website is live. So if you would like to check that out, you can go to letsmakehomehappen.org. The one thing that is missing is the interactive map because we are still signing agencies up. And so as we have signed all of the agencies up by Monday, February 24th, that map will become live and you'll be able to see all of the different agencies that are populated on that map. And that leads me to number 3. So we are asking agencies to sign up by Monday, February 24th, and then the co-op will kick off on Monday, March 9th. So with that, I will provide our contact details again here. So if you have any specific questions for David or myself, you can feel free to send us an email.
Well, thanks, David and Lauren. That's very informative. And I have one question, and maybe this isn't. I might be jumping the gun a little bit, but have you had any opportunity to test the brand in any way?
Yes. So we actually had the opportunity to get feedback on "Let's Make Home Happen," that brand tagline. Some time ago. A few years ago, we were able to get that in front of HCAs and consumers. Actually, and I don't know if folks remember, but we actually shared this concept, and Bruce gave it his approval some years ago at an event.
It was the NHRC conference that you all had, and so we were able to showcase the tagline then. As David mentioned, then we were also able to sort of test it among focus group participants to just get their feedback. At that time, we were testing a number of different taglines, so it wasn't just testing Let's Make Home Happen. We were able to test it against other messaging to see how well it resonated. And so this one was the one that just kept popping up as the one that people just really gravitated to the most, which is why we resurrected it for this co-op.
And I will add, just to piggyback on that, we also tested it among HCAs. About a couple months ago, we had the opportunity to present to a few HCAs in Pennsylvania, and we shared this concept. And some of the feedback we got was, wow, can we start to use that right now? And we said, well, give us a little bit of time. We're still testing that, but it's been tested well among both HCAs as well as consumers. So we feel that, it's a place that can really drive the awareness of housing counseling, as well as build those perceptual, support and trust that Lauren talked about around how do we really get people to use housing counseling and validate, right, what we found in our research. So excellent question. Thank you for that.
So can I just jump in with a question as well? How about Housing Advisor? Did you test that especially with consumers?
Yep, absolutely. So the slide that we went through earlier, and I'm going to try to find that for you real quick here, Bruce. So the slide where we discussed the different names, those actually came directly from participants in our focus groups. So we didn't come up with the names and then test them. We literally asked people in the focus groups, well, if we don't use the term counselor, what should we use? And these were the top 4 answers.
And your focus groups also included counselors and real estate agents, things like that, right? So was there any sort of, how does this work for the consumer as a group? Was there any ability to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So we conducted the focus groups separately. So to your point, we conducted some focus groups with lenders. I think those were in Miami. And then we conducted focus groups with real estate professionals in DC, and then consumers in Dallas, Pittsburgh, and Tampa. So during each one of those individual focus groups, that's when we asked folks, well, what would you like to be called? What would you want, housing counselors to be called? And these were the names that kept coming up over and over again. Over time, what we did with the consumer groups is we literally just showed these 4 because they kept coming up. So those were obviously the most popular. Yeah. So we literally just showed those 4, and it really just kept confirming like what we knew. So Housing Advisor with the consumer groups was always number 1. Now I will mention that Housing Advisor with the housing counselors oftentimes fell to number 2. Folks tended to like Housing Advocate a little bit more in the housing counselor group.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. We have a few questions. Is there a cost to join?
Yes. So we there's 3 tiers of costs based on that chart that I showed, which showed the different services. I didn't want to dive too deep into that today, knowing that we had limited time, but the cost levels are based on a silver, a gold, and a platinum level, and you get different services based on that. So we have a PDF that folks can use that really walks them through each of those levels, and I can share that with you if you're interested. Before you make a decision, we can certainly do that, and if you're interested, you can reach out to us, and I can share that.
Thank you. Will the platform replace the role of a marketing manager at a housing counseling agency?
No, it doesn't have to. I think the great thing that we really did was, again, we used a lot of research that we heard, both from folks where they have one person managing, everything, to different HCAs where they have a marketing manager. So you can either play a role where we can be everything to your team, where we can be your full support team, or we can support a marketing manager that you have. So for example, I know there's a gentleman in Pennsylvania who I've been talking to, and he is a marketing manager, and he does a lot of this. And so we really tried to come up with a solution for him so that we can take some of the load off of his plate so he can do the things that advance his HCA, right? So we can be that consultant support, or we can be your, in-house extension to your team if you don't have a marketing director.
Thank you. Final question. Is the focus for the marketing for first-time, not the final question, thanks guys, is the marketing focus on first-time home buyers or for renters as well?
It's for all of our housing counseling audiences. So it reaches all the 5 audiences. So we've got, our renters, first-time home buyers, our foreclosure default, and then we've got homeless as well as reverse mortgagers. So it really spans the gap. I know that a lot of what we've heard from our HCAs is that they want to focus on first-time home buyers, but certainly our experience and our research is among all of those audiences, and we do have materials that can reach all those segments.
Thank you. Could you go into a little more detail as to why housing counseling agencies can't put their own agency's logo on the marketing materials?
No, they can. They can.
They can put their own marketing on our materials. I want to make a distinction there. So
right.
when we did the materials for HUD, so many of you may be aware of a brochure series or posters or a number of materials with a nice housing line on top of it. That was our work. But one of the things that we learned through HUD was that when the HUD seal is on a material, it cannot be co-branded with an HCA material. So, HCAs were limited to what they could do to put their own logo and brand on the HUD created materials.
Right. And so just to clarify that, for example, the poster or flyer that you see on the screen, it will be able to be co-branded. So you will be able to put your logo, and not only that, but you'll be able to put your agency contact details. So that was the other kind of issue that we had when we were working with HUD, was that the 1-800 number was on all the materials. And so what we were hearing from housing counseling agencies was that I don't want the consumer to have to call an agent, call the 1-800 number just to ultimately find me. They want to be able to find them directly. So we will be able to put your agency's phone number, your agency's website, your agency's logo. If there's a sponsor that's, let's say, paying for your marketing materials, and so their logo needs to be on the information as well, we can do that too.
Great, thanks. Those are all the questions. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say an example of the sponsor one is on the event flyer. You'll see here, so in this example, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae sponsored, and so that's just a mock-up to show you what it could look like. But to Lauren's point, we can put all those specific things that you have for your agency on these materials, and that's something that unfortunately could not be done with the HUD materials, and that's part of the impetus behind this co-op, right? It was, how do we really better meet the needs of these HCAs as you're trying to build your awareness and positively change perceptions of housing counseling.
So to just kind of jump in a little bit more on this kind of specializing of these materials that you have, it sounds like what you're saying also is that if an organization wants to include something more or make some maybe even more significant changes to the template, that is something that you'll work with them on. So for example, if they want to include a picture of a successful home buyer that they worked with, for example.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. So these are completely customizable.
Yep, very flexible. That's the great thing about a clearinghouse. You can let us know what your needs are, and we're going to be responsive to that. I think one of the things that we've learned is that, oftentimes national campaigns are very rigid, right? And they don't have the flexibility for individual localized projects to be able to do what they need to do. The success of housing counseling comes in the local connections that you have with your communities, right? People know who you are locally. So we kept that in mind as we thought about this, to say, okay, we understand the culture of our audiences, and our audiences are HCAs as well as consumers. So to Lauren's point, yes, we can be flexible, and I think our goal is to consistently meet your needs throughout the process and keep evolving this so that you don't feel like you're locked into something that's out of touch with the audiences that you're speaking to.
Great, thank you. Those are all the questions.
Wonderful.
Good. Ellie, have we got anything more on this, or should we jump on to the next topic?
No, I think we're good. Thank you, David and Lauren.
Great, and certainly connect with them to get pricing sheets and more information, or you can check in with Ellie, who's the co-chair of their advisory committee, for background as well. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just very quickly say that CMR is doing pretty regular webinars about the marketing co-op. So when you reach out to them, they can let you know when those are happening.
Good. Okay. So quick plug for Pictures Worth 1,000 Words, and we find these really valuable. Please keep them coming. I'd love to give your organizational recognition. This will show up on the Facebook page, but we do them when we do outgoing events as well, and hopefully we think these will be appropriate for outreach flyers and things like that as well. On next week's call, oh, actually, membership dues reminder. So please consider joining NHRC, and the real reason to join NHRC is to support our work and especially our ability to do the lobbying work in Congress, which doesn't get covered by many of our funders. This is hugely valuable for us, and obviously valuable for everybody when we can get more money into the pot for everybody. We still have the credit report discount, and turns out a few of you still haven't used that yet, so please, we get regular requests for the materials to do this, and it's quite active, so please do that. We are talking about another discount, which we'll be announcing in 2 weeks. But main thing is really to support the work so that we can continue advocating for you in Congress and the Hill and engaging you with it. We've had actually great calls with a number of Senate offices, especially that Melody's been conducting, where we have many of you have been calling in to join them to represent your state, and that's highly, highly effective. So thanks for all that. You can always get the membership application just by going to our website and clicking the membership link. Quickly, then let's move on to what the call will be next week, and it will, or in 2 weeks, and it will be, we're going to have it's a software company started by people who are basically refugees from CFPB, and they wanted to set up a program, kind of like a TurboTax for federal student loans. And it's a very smart program. It's actually very, very easy to use in a complicated world where you need to figure out which of the various programs are the best match for you. So, and I say that you loosely, I mean, the idea is that this could work for you, it could work for your staff, it could work for your clients. And you can use it, and it's completely free. And if you want to use it for filing with the Department of Education, that there's a charge for that. That's their business model. But we're working on bringing the cost down so that, and we'll have that information on the call in 2 weeks. But it's useful no matter what, but very useful for, especially if you want to really get people started on the best path for their particular loan situation. We're very interested in how we started talking with them was around the Public Service Forgiveness Program, which we've spent a fair amount of time on these calls about, and certainly employees of nonprofits, as in your agency, could have could reduce their payment according to their what their income is, and over 10 years, what they could pay off their entire loan, and anything at the end of 10 years that's still on the balance would be forgiven. And that's for working in government agencies and or nonprofits. So we think this is a tool to make it easier for people to stay in the housing counseling world. It's really a staff benefit. And as it's been widely shown, most people who have applied have failed. And increasingly, we have figured out kind of what the fixes are, and it's not rocket science, but using this program, people can get, there's a documentation you file you can use that program to figure out which of the loan products on federal student loans this would apply for. It consolidates them, which is part of the requirement. And then it also will create the paperwork that you file for with the Department of Ed every year. So some people, part of their problem was that they had trouble going back and documenting their history. And we think that one of the things that would be helpful would be to document this you treat your employees as this is a benefit that can help them and kind of lock them into getting this benefit. So it solves a bunch of the problems. It's also, you can use it for clients. We'll go into a great deal more detail in 2 weeks, but we think this is a valuable tool for you and your clients and your staff. So more about that in 2 weeks. And with that, we're going to close it out. Thanks so much, everybody. Keep an eye out for, be sure to do the sign-on letter and reach out, especially to House and Senate, especially Senate, about getting onto their appropriations request for $65 million for housing counseling. All right. Thanks, everybody.